Hey again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and I've made a number of videos now on how to propagate plants from cuttings, but I get that follow-up question of what do I do next? After I've developed roots on that plant, when do I begin to water it? When do I begin to fertilize it? When do I pot it up? When do I prune it? I'm going to answer all of those in this video here. Now obviously I'm growing my plants for sale, but the steps are no different whether you're growing them for sale, whether you're giving them away, whether you're putting them later into your own garden. Those first steps don't vary a whole lot from those different purposes. So I'll go through those here. I am in a position now, because it's early spring or late winter of the year after I've done propagation, a number of the plants that were in those videos I made last year on cutting propagation are ready to look at right now. And I'll start with this one right here, which is, of course, roses. Now this one was propagated in June of last year. It's had a bit of time to put on roots, and maybe I'll get a close-up here, but has beautiful roots all the way to the bottom of the pot. So this one is definitely ready for its up potting stage. I'm going to go through a couple more here. I have, of course, the St. John's wort that I propagated last year. In my video on 4 easy plants to grow from cuttings, I also have my hydrangea, which, as you remember, rooted rather slowly from semi-hardwood cuttings, a lot faster from softwood cuttings. These are the semi-hardwood cuttings coming back now. I'll show you a close-up there, but obviously shooting quite nicely from the base of those plants, so success there. The third one I'll show you here is Perovskia, which is a perennial, and it obviously is a herbaceous perennial, dies back to the ground in the fall, but you can see that it's just starting to throw new shoots here as well. And the last one I will show you here is a red flowering currant, and it almost looks like it wants to go directly into flower in my pot here, silly little thing, but should come through just fine. All right, let's talk watering first, because we don't really water cuttings. We water plants with roots, because those roots can pull up the moisture and transpire the moisture from the soil level out into the atmosphere. Your cuttings don't have that same advantage. So we don't talk about watering cuttings, we talk about misting them, putting a little bit of mist on the surface of those stems, the surface of that foliage, to stop them from wilting out before they can root. Or we place over a humidity tent to try to keep humidity in. Either way, we're not watering your cuttings until they've rooted. But once you've checked on them, once you've pulled up on them and they pull back, or once you've actually verified visually whether they have cuttings, then you can begin watering. And it is around this same time that we talk about feeding. Again, first as a very dilute solution. It doesn't have a lot of roots, it doesn't have a lot of nutrient needs in the cutting yet. So putting on too high of a concentration of fertilizer may damage the newly developing roots. So I usually start off at about quarter strength, move on to about half strength, and then as the plant develops over the next, say, month or so and starts pushing out new shoots and new foliage, then I try it at full strength and see how it responds. I usually water and fertilize in one step through a hose end sprayer. I've done a video recently on how to liquid feed your plants. That's what I use, and that way I can control what concentration goes into the pot. The next question goes to, when do you pot up your plants? And obviously, as soon as the roots have hit the side and bottom of the pot, you can go ahead and pot them onto a larger size. I generally wait. So I'm growing in a cool temperate climate, and I want to see if my plants make it through the winter in a healthy stage with good roots before I pot them in next spring. It saves me the wasted effort of having potted them the previous fall and then seeing them fail over the winter. So something like this that has all these roots across the base can definitely be potted up. I usually go from this size here, which is a 9 centimeter, or I think they call it a quart size in the States, into what is called a gallon pot. And it's just a loose soil mix. Put the plant in, not too much pushing, and then top it with a little bit of extra soil. Now this is usually the point where I get some questions about my potting mix, which is a wood-based mix. Now, because I live in a forestry region, that's what they supply here locally. It's based on composted bark mulch, plus a shredded wood fiber that makes it both good at maintaining moisture, but also freely draining. What is available in your local area may vary quite a lot, and that's kind of the nature of soil mixes, is that you have to take what you can get locally, but do assess it for both its moisture holding capacity and its drainage capacity or air-filled porosity, and I've done another video on that. I also have it incorporated with a slow release fertilizer at the low end of the recommended rate, and I do that so that it has a base level of fertilizer, and then as I see how the plant is reacting to that, I can top up with liquid feed as I grow the plant through. And the final question I usually get about the following steps after rooting is, when do I begin to prune the plant? Now, this one that I just potted, I don't prune it at all. It has basically come through the cutting and rooting stage just like this, and unless there's something crossing or something that is misshapen about the plant, I usually leave it alone pretty much. By the second year that they are in the pot, in the winter, usually, I do a prune to promote branching. And of course, this applies to roses. If you're talking about perennials, usually you can take those right to the ground over the winter period. But for roses, you usually prune them to make a sort of an open vase-shaped shrub, and that's the goal of the pruning. So I don't do a lot of pruning early on. I usually wait until the plant has been in the pot for about a year before I do any major pruning on the plants. All right, I hope this has been useful to you in figuring out what are the next steps after you propagate or get some roots on your cuttings. And if you have any questions about cuttings whatsoever, feel free to drop those into my comments below. I'm a bit of a plant nut, happy to answer your questions.